I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow.
For decades, the most painful thoughts Diana carried about Camilla remained locked beyond the reach of the public, the palace, and even those closest to her. Then one handwritten diary entry surfaced. Its words were raw, specific, and devastating. But the greater shock came moments later, when Charles Spencer stepped forward, confirmed the page belonged to his sister, and revealed why he had remained silent, while the royal family built its future over Diana's unresolved pain. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The page carried a date that changed everything. June 18, 1994. Diana had written that Camilla had entered every room before I did, even when she was not physically there. This was not a passing line born from anger. The princess described an exchange with Charles, the influence of another woman over her marriage, and a fear that the palace would polish the story until Diana appeared responsible for being pushed aside. The palace, meaning the royal household and officials who protect the monarchy, now faced words it could neither remove nor explain. Charles Spencer received a scanned copy shortly before dawn at Althorpe, his family estate and Diana's childhood home. He read the first paragraph beside his desk. Then his expression changed. Her brother lowered himself into a chair and read the page, slower this time. When an aide asked whether the handwriting was genuine, he did not hesitate. "It is hers," he said. Those 3 words turned a leak into a royal crisis. Camilla learned of the entry at Clarence House, the residence associated with Charles and the Queen Consort. She accepted a printed copy and read in silence. Diana's description of feeling erased while still alive stopped her halfway down the page. She placed the document face down, yet kept one hand pressed over it as though the words might rise again. Her composure held, but the stillness revealed the wound. Then one sentence pushed the story into darker territory. Diana had written, "My brother knows where the fuller account must remain." Hours later, Spencer broke his silence through a recorded statement from Althorpe. He confirmed that his sister kept private written records during the hardest years of her marriage, and refused to dismiss the page as emotional exaggeration. The leak was no longer about one diary entry. It pointed toward other pages, other memories, and a truth Diana feared would be rewritten. To understand why she named Camilla, the story must move into the private wounds carried by Diana, Charles, the Queen Consort, and the brother who guarded her voice forever. The leak had crossed the palace walls, but its deepest damage was personal. The diary page pulled 4 people into the same emotional room. The woman who wrote it, the woman she blamed, the man caught between them, and the brother who feared Diana had never received an honest hearing. Each carried danger. Reputation stood against memory, loyalty against guilt, and silence against a truth that refused to remain buried. Diana had stopped seeing the collapse of her marriage as a simple romantic defeat by 1994. She believed the royal household, the family members and officials surrounding the sovereign, demanded restraint from her, while private loyalties continued. That mattered because she was not only a wounded wife, she was also the mother of William and Harry, and she feared that losing influence inside the institution would weaken her place in her son's future. Camilla faced a different terror. She had spent years moving from public hostility toward royal acceptance, becoming part of the life Charles once kept separate from duty. Now the entry threatened to undo that progress. Diana did not describe her as a later companion who arrived after a broken marriage. She described the Queen Consort as an active emotional presence during its most painful years, and that distinction placed Camilla's rehabilitation in danger. Charles Spencer opened a drawer in Althorpe's library and found one of Diana's old notes beneath papers. Her brother remembered her asking whether anyone would defend her account when she could no longer speak for herself. He gripped the note and felt his delay. The greater wound came from wondering whether his silence had allowed others to reshape her memory. King Charles read the diary entry alone. When he reached the passage describing Diana waiting after an argument while knowing his attention was elsewhere, he removed his glasses and set them beside the page. The monarch did not challenge the handwriting. He did not dismiss the emotion. He asked only how the document had escaped, and that question revealed how clearly he recognized the moment behind the words. Camilla recognized something even more dangerous: the quiet arrangement. Only Diana, Charles, and a senior intermediary had heard that phrase during a private discussion. She understood that the entry came from direct knowledge, not gossip. Spencer confirmed the page through a recorded statement, yet refused to say whether it belonged to a larger diary. His hesitation suggested he was protecting more pages, or their trusted keeper. The truth now depended on one hidden event: a summer encounter in 1994, when a sentence behind a closed door convinced Diana that history was already being rewritten before she could defend herself. Every explosive confession begins with a moment the writer cannot forget. For Diana, that moment came during a private meeting arranged to reduce tension and protect the monarchy from further public humiliation. It was supposed to calm the crisis. Instead, one conversation left her convinced that the future had already been negotiated without her. She returned home, closed the door to her room, opened a leather-bound diary, and wrote the entry that would surface more than 3 decades later. Diana entered the private London residence in June 1994, expecting clarity, not another carefully managed silence. The meeting had been presented as a peace effort between her, Charles, and those influencing their fractured marriage. For her, the stakes reached far beyond personal pride. She needed assurance that her place as William and Harry's mother would not be weakened by private arrangements made without her knowledge. Charles spoke first, choosing words that sounded controlled but carried a brutal finality. "The future cannot remain hostage to your feelings," he told her. Diana stared at him and asked whether Camilla was already included in that future. The king-to-be did not answer. Then a chair moved in the adjoining room. The sound was small, but it shattered every promise of privacy. Diana walked toward the partially closed door and demanded to know why Camilla had been listening. The other woman stepped forward without apology. She said the meeting could never succeed if everyone refuses reality. Diana felt the meaning immediately. The queen consort's future role had not been formally created, but the emotional arrangement surrounding Charles was already clear. Decisions had been made, loyalties had settled, and Diana was being asked to accept the ruins quietly. That night, Diana returned home burning with restrained anger. She opened her diary and wrote, "She had already been invited into the future, while I was still being asked to behave inside the ruins." The sentence became the emotional center of the leaked page because it captured more than jealousy. It recorded her fear that the monarchy would preserve Charles's choices, while reducing her suffering to instability. Shortly after midnight, Diana telephoned Charles Spencer. She told her brother that one day people would claim she had imagined the pressure around her. He urged her to preserve every conversation she could remember. "Then I will write it plainly," she answered. Spencer never forgot that recorded call summary, and someone else knew the diary had begun. The leak was no accident of memory. Once the page became public, the old confrontation moved into the present, forcing him and Camilla toward a new collision over who had the right to define Diana's truth. The palace hoped Charles Spencer would confirm the handwriting and then withdraw. He did the opposite. When a private request arrived asking him to soften his language, Diana's brother demanded a direct conversation. No press officers, no prepared statements, no protective distance. The meeting placed him face to face with Camilla, the woman named in the diary, and the silence between them carried almost 30 years of grief, resentment, survival, and unfinished accusation. Spencer received the proposed statement through a senior royal representative hours after his recorded confirmation from Althorp. The wording asked him to admit that Diana had been emotionally distressed when she wrote the page. That mattered because the palace could accept the handwriting while quietly weakening its meaning. For Spencer, accepting that phrase would betray the promise he believed he had made to Diana before her death. Clarence House, the London residence used by Charles and Camilla, then became the setting for a meeting neither side could safely avoid. Charles opened the conversation and left after several tense minutes. Spencer entered carrying no documents, because he wanted no argument over evidence to distract from Diana's words. Camilla rose but did not offer her hand. He told her that discomfort did not make his sister unstable. She answered that a single diary entry could never carry the weight of an entire history, and her voice remained controlled, even as the accusation deepened. Camilla then spoke of the hatred she had endured after Diana's death. Spencer pushed his chair back and stood. He said suffering later did not erase suffering caused earlier. The queen consort stayed seated, but her face tightened. She reminded him that Charles had also lived through years of conflict. He replied that the king's pain had never been used to question whether his memories were real. The room changed when Camilla asked what else existed. She did not challenge the handwriting. She asked whether Spencer possessed more entries. Diana's brother paused before saying the meeting concerned what had already emerged, not what remained protected. His restraint answered more than a denial ever could. Charles returned as Spencer described Diana's deepest fear, that the monarchy would absorb Camilla into its official story while reducing the princess to a tragic interruption. The king heard every word. He closed the door behind him and said nothing. That silence shifted the power. Camilla wanted protection. Spencer wanted recognition. Charles now had to choose whether the crown, meaning the institution surrounding the sovereign, would defend the present, acknowledge the past, or attempt to bury both beneath careful language. The diary had reopened a private wound, but his next decision would turn it into an official royal crisis. At the center of the storm stood Charles, no longer the prince Diana had written about, but the king responsible for protecting the monarchy, and the husband expected to defend Camilla. Every available choice carried damage. Silence could look like admission. Denial could appear cruel. An attack on Spencer could deepen the scandal. And somewhere beneath the crown was the private knowledge that Diana's diary described moments he remembered far more clearly than he wished. Charles held powers no private citizen possessed. He could authorize a palace response, end further contact with Spencer, and instruct advisors to question the diary's context without directly calling Diana's brother dishonest. The monarchy, meaning the institution built around the sovereign and the continuity of the crown, faced two competing legacies. Defending Camilla protected the present queen and his reign. Acknowledging Diana protected William, Harry, and the memory of a woman the public still connected to royal life. The king waited until his advisors left before opening the folder again. He reached the passage describing Diana beside a telephone that never rang after an argument. Charles closed the file, walked toward the fireplace, then returned and opened it once more. He did not deny the moment. He remembered it, and memory made every political option feel like a personal confession. The crown offered power, but no escape. Camilla entered later and asked for protection. She told him that silence would allow one painful page to define her entire life. Charles answered that attacking Diana would wound William and Harry and reopen damage their sons had carried for years. The queen heard caution where she wanted loyalty. She asked whether preserving the monarchy now required sacrificing her reputation. He gave no immediate answer, and the pause cut deeper than refusal. A draft statement soon arrived, describing the diary as an incomplete interpretation, written during marital conflict. Charles read the paragraph, drew a line through it, and said Diana's state of mind would not become a weapon. His decision shocked the advisors because it removed the safest defense available to the palace. William then spoke with his father in a private recorded briefing prepared for the royal archive. The prince insisted that any response must recognize his mother's suffering without putting her on trial again. Charles listened, knowing the future king's position had closed the door on outright denial. The monarch finally approved a restrained statement acknowledging pain on every side. It protected no one completely. Camilla saw compromise as abandonment, while Spencer saw it as evasion. When the palace spoke, Diana's handwriting carried more force than its measured words, and the first cracks appeared inside Charles and Camilla's carefully defended unity. The statement was only a few sentences long, but Camilla understood what it did not say. It did not reject Diana's account. It did not accuse Charles Spencer of exploiting his sister. It did not declare the entry false. Instead, the palace acknowledged a period of profound private suffering and asked for dignity. To the public, it sounded measured. To Camilla, seated alone with the printed statement in her hands, it sounded like the crown stepping away from her. Buckingham Palace released the response through its official press office. The institution, meaning the royal household that speaks for the monarch, acknowledged Diana's deep distress during the collapse of her marriage. It refused to discuss private writings, yet it did not challenge Spencer's authentication. That choice mattered, because silence on the page's truth sounded like acceptance, while silence on Camilla's defense sounded like distance. Camilla read the statement twice at Clarence House. She placed it on the table, removed her glasses, and asked why her pain appeared only inside the phrase, "all sides." No aide answered quickly enough. The queen consort dismissed them and remained alone, feeling the protection she expected from the crown dissolve into careful language. Charles entered later and found her still beside the document. He said the response was necessary to protect William and Harry from another public battle over their mother. Camilla asked whether defending Diana's sons now required leaving his wife exposed. The king tried to explain that any attack on the diary would become an attack on Diana herself. She heard logic, not reassurance. Spencer answered the palace through a recorded statement from Althorp. he revealed one final sentence from the entry. "They may forgive her one day, but they must not pretend I felt no wound." Diana's brother explained that the line was not a demand for punishment. It was a plea against historical erasure, and that meaning made the palace's restraint feel even heavier. Then the source of the leak emerged. Spencer learned through a documented account from a former assistant that the page came from a photographic copy made while Diana's papers were being organized years earlier. The original remained secure, locked beyond the reach of reporters, advisors, and every nervous palace official seeking another weapon. That discovery meant the private archive could contain material no unauthorized person had ever seen. Victory now promised only more suffering. Camilla stood isolated, Charles remained divided, and Spencer refused to retreat. The crisis could no longer be solved through another communique, a formal palace message to the public. Its turning point would come from two men speaking privately about the woman they had failed to protect in different ways. There were no courtiers in the room, no communications advisors, and no prepared language. Charles Spencer arrived carrying the burden of a brother who believed Diana's suffering had been minimized. The king entered carrying the burden of a former husband who knew some truths could no longer be repaired. Their private conversation did not erase betrayal, restore trust, or alter the past. But for the first time, two men spoke about Diana without using the monarchy as a shield. Charles had invited Spencer to a quiet royal residence, after both sides agreed that no aides would attend. Nothing said there would appear as an official quotation. That promise mattered because official language, the carefully approved wording used by the royal household, had already turned private grief into strategy. Diana's brother entered expecting pressure to prevent further releases. The monarch entered hoping to stop the conflict before more pages surfaced. Spencer asked the question no advisor had dared to place before Charles. Had Diana been wrong to believe Camilla already possessed a secure place in his future before the marriage had emotionally ended? The king looked down at his hands. He said the princess understood more than he had admitted at the time. Her brother did not interrupt, because the answer carried the weight of a confession. Charles then accepted responsibility without blaming Diana's emotions or hiding behind the institution. He said the marriage had failed her, people around them had failed her, and his own fear of confronting the truth had caused deeper pain. Spencer felt his anger loosen, but not disappear. He told the king that regret spoken decades late could not repair what his sister endured alone. Spencer finally explained his silence through a private recorded account prepared for the family archive. He had protected the diary because Diana wrote during moments of extreme vulnerability, and he refused to turn her suffering into entertainment. He spoke publicly only after the leaked page was questioned and its meaning distorted. Charles understood that the silence had been protection, not secrecy for power. The two men reached a private commitment. Charles agreed that the palace would not attack Diana's character, question her stability, or use private briefings to weaken the diary. Spencer agreed that he would not release additional pages merely to punish Camilla or embarrass the monarch. No cameras captured their departure, and no public handshake followed. Yet the meeting changed everything permanently. Separate statements from Spencer and the palace soon carried the same truth. Diana's pain was real and would not be erased. The agreement calmed the private war, but the world had already read her words, and public judgment was about to begin. By sunrise, Diana's handwritten words were no longer confined to a private archive or a royal dispute. They appeared across television screens, newspaper stands, and phones around the world. Yet the reaction was not driven only by scandal. Many people recognized something painfully human in the entry. The terror of being replaced, the humiliation of knowing others have accepted a future that excludes you, and the desperate need to leave behind proof that your suffering was real. Broadcasters moved from asking whether the page was genuine to asking what it meant. Diana's diary became the most personal surviving account of her emotional position during the collapse of the marriage. That mattered because the public had heard speeches, interviews, and official statements before, but handwriting felt harder to polish. The late Princess of Wales, a title given to the wife of the heir to the throne, now spoke through words never prepared for an audience. Royal representatives repeated that the monarchy would not dispute private grief or attack Diana's memory. The royal household, meaning the officials who speak and act for the sovereign, also refused to campaign against Charles Spencer. That decision prevented the crisis from becoming a public war between the palace and her family. Spencer watched the coverage from Althorp and understood that restraint had replaced retaliation. One newspaper captured the national mood, with a front page showing only Diana's handwriting beneath the headline, "I was still inside the ruins." Commuters at Victoria Station stopped beside a newsstand. Several read in silence while train announcements echoed above them. The moment mattered, because anger had given way to recognition. People were not only judging Charles or Camilla, they were recognizing the loneliness inside Diana's words. By afternoon, a small crowd gathered outside Kensington Palace. One woman placed a white rose beside the gates with a card reading, "You were heard." Others followed. The residence, once associated with Diana's public life, became a place of quiet acknowledgement rather than protest. Charles Spencer then issued a recorded statement from Althorpe. He said his sister did not need to be treated as flawless to be treated truthfully, and he confirmed that no further pages would be released for spectacle. Camilla changed course as well. Through a personal statement, she acknowledged that Diana suffered during a period that damaged all three lives. The Queen did not deny the entry or ask for forgiveness. The reaction left one conclusion unavoidable. Diana's words had not defeated Camilla or condemned Charles. They had restored her voice to a history polished by time. With the arguments exhausted and the private pages returned to silence, only one question remained. What had those words changed? The leaked diary entry did not overthrow a queen, destroy a marriage, or reverse the choices made decades earlier. Its impact was quieter and more permanent. Diana's handwriting forced the monarchy to acknowledge that acceptance of the present could not depend upon erasing the pain of the past. Charles Spencer's silence ended, not because he wanted revenge, but because he refused to watch his sister's truth be dismissed. In the end, the page delivered the recognition Diana feared she would never receive. Spencer confirmed through a final recorded statement from Althorpe that the remaining writings would stay protected. Buckingham Palace ended its public response, and no campaign was launched against him. The royal household, meaning the family members and officials who support the sovereign, no longer tried to weaken the diary's meaning. That restraint mattered because it allowed Diana's account to stand without forcing another bitter contest over her memory. Charles returned to the copied page one final time. The king read the closing sentence slowly, folded the document, and placed it inside the official file rather than ordering its removal. His choice did not undo the past, but it accepted that Diana's pain belonged within the history of his reign. The monarch could preserve the crown, yet he could no longer protect it through silence. Camilla reached a different form of acceptance. She understood that public respect for her could never require people to forget the suffering Diana endured. The Queen stopped pressing for a stronger defense and accepted that her place in royal history would exist beside the princess, never in place of her. Spencer returned to Althorpe and locked the original material away. Diana's brother had defended her voice without exposing every private wound. His decision preserved both truth and dignity. William and Harry were also released from an impossible choice. They could remain connected to the monarchy while acknowledging that their mother had been hurt by the people and pressures surrounding it. The diary did not prove that one person carried every piece of blame. It proved that Diana understood she was being pushed toward the margins of her own story, and she wrote so history could not pretend otherwise. Spencer's intervention forced the monarchy to admit what polished language had concealed. She was wounded, she understood what was happening, and she was never erased. The crown survived, Camilla remained queen, and Charles continued his reign. But Diana's handwritten words secured the victory she feared would be denied to her, the right to have her pain remembered as truth. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.